Welcome to What Do Siblings Talk About?
I'm Jacob,
And I'm Veronica.
and we're siblings.
Yay.
And we're back with episode 007. I feel like that's appropriate. This is another, we'll call it an influencer review, although this time it's not as much an influencer as a content creator. So this is a content creator I was not familiar with, not with this particular one. This is the Exorcist Files. It's a podcast. It might be more than a podcast. It's kind of a brand. And Veronica, you proposed this. So want to kick off what this is and what we're going to be talking about?
Yes. So this is a podcast by an exorcist. So he's a Catholic priest who he's been trained, and basically his job is to cast out demons from people, places, and things. Mostly people. And I think several people had mentioned this podcast to me, and I didn't listen to it for a while because I was sort of like, demons, Satan's, true crime, not really my thing. And then he happened to give a talk near where I was, so I got a chance to see him in person. Okay. And he probably talked for 45 minutes.
So this is the priest, right?
Yes, sorry. This is Father Carlos Martins, who is the exorcist of the Exorcist Files.
We'll be putting a link to the particular episodes we listened to discuss today in the notes below. So check that out.
Yeah. So he was traveling around the U.S. with the arm of St. Jude, who is one of the apostles of Jesus, and giving talks along the way. So he did this nearby, and it was just again not something I'm really into. But then I went to see him speak, and I just remember being surprised at how long he had talked afterwards, because it went by really fast. He's a very engaging storyteller. So it was only after that I got into the podcast. And it's a mix of things. A lot of it is he has cases of, like, from his own experience with exorcisms. So some of it is sort of dramatized cases, very much like a true crime or a detective type podcast. So that's
what you forced me to listen to.
Yes, that's what I forced Jake to listen to. That's maybe half the episodes, and then I'd say the other half will be like QAs with Father Martins, or interviews with other people. So they'll interview like psychologists, neurologists, other both Catholics and non-Catholics who sort of have experience encountering demons. So it's a fascinating podcast, even if you think you're not into stories about Satan.
Yep. So I'm going to throw up the website for this on the screen here. So Father Carlos Martins, we have right here. We're at exorcistfiles.tv. So host and producer, but the Exorcist Files as a brand, as a show, is also clearly and this guy talks even in the dramatized storytelling shows by this fellow Ryan Bethia. So it's sort of appears to be a bit of a co-production, sort of like when you get a famous person who needs their autobiography written and they don't have they don't have the skills to really do that themselves, so they have to get a ghostwriter. So Ryan is our ghostwriter for Father Martin's experiences and stories. Does that seem about right to you, Veronica?
Yeah, no, and he, there's some episodes where you might not hear Father Martins at all, because if when they do a dramatization of one of his cases, like he himself in the own case will be done by an actor.
Yeah. So I have to point out that you're failing on the appropriate gender coding. You're supposed to be into true crime and murder mystery type stuff. And
sorry, well, a lot of podcasts I listen to in the background while I'm doing something else. And this, it probably all true crime. I think that's something you have to pay attention to. You can't quite listen to it in the background. Um,
Yeah.
because you sort of have to follow, the clues and which character is doing what. Um, so I think in general, I don't tend to listen to as many of those podcasts where where you have to
Yeah.
pay attention. This one is very good for not paying attention. I recommend what two siblings talk about is a good background going to sleep podcast.
Yes, that's probably true, but you wouldn't want to miss any of the content. So be sure
This
you
is true.
what be sure you know what your minutes of sleep setting you set on your phone is, so you can
Yes.
rewind that much and re-listen to if
Well, no,
necessary.
no, no. You should listen to the whole thing, and you'll miss the second half, and then you'll have to go back and listen to it again, and that will drive listens.
There we go. Planned,
It's my official
solved.
recommendation.
All right. So we listened to two episodes, which were a sort of combined audio dramatization of a particular case that Father Martin's had. What is the title of these episodes, Veronica? I should know, but
Uh,
maybe if I click on the hyperlink you put, that would be a helpful thing.
off the top of my
So,
head.
Dynasty of Death. This is season 2, case 7. Dynasty of Death. I suggested that we're not going to spoil the ending of this because it has a surprising ending, but actually the title makes more sense after listening to the whole case. Um, so, what made you recommend this particular episode, Veronica?
Um, well, I wanted a case episode versus like an interview QA episode because I think the cases are really the backbone of the Exorcist Files, right?
Yeah.
It's listening to this exorcist with his case files. That's what you want to hear. Um, and I don't know. I think this one in particular, maybe because it has that twist at the end, was sort of surprising. Sometimes, if you happen to binge this podcast, you might notice there's sort of reoccurring themes, and especially if
Sure.
you listen to a lot of it at once, like on a long car ride or something.
Then it's
Um,
the unique ones that
yeah,
stick out.
yeah. It's sort of the surprising ones where you're like, wait, what? What happened?
No
So
way.
yeah, I think this one had stuck in my head as like I did not see the end coming at all.
Yep.
So yeah, I think I liked it
I
particularly
would
for
say
that reason.
same. I wasn't like trying to figure out where it was going, but I had the same
Yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Um,
you're not.
and
Yeah,
it,
I guess it's a
it
little bit odd when the devil is the main bad guy. It's a little
yeah.
hard to figure out what exactly he's gonna do.
And I'll say Ryan is a pretty good storyteller as well. I'm presuming he wrote the script for this because he does a good job of actually foreshadowing some things and of letting you hang in suspense when something different or new or surprising occurs, not just presenting a weird thing and then instantly solving it. He lets you sit
Yeah,
there for a minute, like wait, what?
yeah.
So I'll commend it for that. I do want to say, coming right at this as a person who does not experience emotions, um, it made me a little, it made
I
me a
like
little bit,
I like how you just threw that in there, but
yeah, it made me a little bit uncomfortable as I initially started hearing the dramatization. Um, I like good acting. I really like fantastic acting. So, um, who's the guy who's just on SNL again? He's in this. He's in Ghostbusters. Come on, Veronica, help me out here.
Paul
Um,
Rudd.
Tom Hanks.
I don't know which
Bill
goes.
Murray. It's Bill
Oh, Bill
Murray.
Murray.
So I did not actually see a lot of Bill Murray movies. Don't know if I saw any growing up. I didn't really get introduced to him until a while ago. I saw um, what's the one where time recurs? Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. I was gonna
Yeah,
say I'm not gonna be a lot of help with any of these
but then
references.
is it Bill Murray who's in the movie with all of the movie where he names a basketball Wilson? Is that
That's
Bill
Tom
Murray?
Hanks.
That's Tom
The
Hanks. Okay. I wanted to
Castaway.
bring that up. Tom
Okay.
Hanks, well, Bill Murray, great actor. Sorry. And now Bill Murray, you can go over there. Tom Hanks, to make a movie where your entire movie is just you on a deserted island monologuing and acting, and to make that watchable, that's really impressive. Um, that's good acting. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I have a personal issue with Tom Hanks, so
Oh,
I feel
okay.
like I shouldn't add to this conversation. I don't like his
Gotcha.
acting at all in anything. But that
Wow,
could be,
that's strong.
that could be that's like one of the hills I'm going to die on. Um, yeah,
Interesting. Okay, we'll have to delve into this later when we get into our deep personal psychology and
him and
traumas.
Tom Cruise is another one where I can't see him on the screen.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Anyway,
All right
back
then.
to your
So,
acting point.
yeah, I really like really good acting, and I find it very difficult to tolerate melodrama and mediocre acting,
Yeah,
unless it's being done for shtick. Like I think I've mentioned before already, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, his acting is mediocre,
over the
but
top.
it's mediocre in a way that I particularly enjoy.
Yeah,
So I like his stuff. Anyway, I found it a little uncomfortable at first, and actually, it grew on me significantly. So this episode is written dramatized with the main protagonists, the main people who actually this is not a made up
yeah,
story, unless you're a person who absolutely doesn't believe in the existence of anything supernatural. Um, but at least this is a person and people involved in this story who think this is what happened to them, or else are really big
yeah,
liars. I'm more on the side of thinking it's a real thing, but
yeah.
the
No, I think
yeah,
everyone involved like 100% believes this is what happened.
yep.
I don't think there's any doubt there.
So this is a real the particular case is about a guy who was experiencing demonic possession, where a demon was actually controlling his actions, his behaviors under certain conditions, and his primarily the other character is his wife, and eventually things get weird enough for them that they get referred to Father Martin's, and then it continue the second episode in this is basically Father Martin's experience with them
Mm.
and how things went down. Um, so that's going to kick off something first off, Veronica. Um, Hopefully, we're speaking to an audience that's not just people who reflexively are going to agree with the same kind of perspective we have. What are your thoughts on demons, exorcisms, the supernatural, and like where this fits into people's worldviews? Uh,
Um, I mean, I think demons exist. I don't know. It's one of these things where, uh, for me at least, like on one level, yes, I believe they exist. On another level, as you go about your like practical day to day stuff, it can be hard to believe that these things actually happen.
yeah,
Um, and I think I sort of hold hold both of those views a little bit all the time. Sometimes it'll swing one way, sometimes it'll swing the other way. Um, where you go, yes, intellectually, I believe in demons, I believe in angels. But then you hear some stories like this one, and you're like, wait a minute,
yeah,
it's so outlandish that you're like, wait, really?
right, yeah.
um, but then I think you see a sort of preponderance of evidence, and you go, okay, I guess that really did happen. Um,
So
and then
something
I don't know. Sometimes I
some
start to worry. I'm like, well, if that happened to this random guy Joe, that is it going to happen to me tomorrow?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, so I also want to note this cuts both ways in terms of Christian spirituality. Um, there's one of the greatest Catholic teachers of spirituality is Ignatius of Loyola. Anyone familiar with the Jesuits? He founded the Jesuits back in the 1500s, and one of my favorite, one of one of the funniest things I ever heard that he apparently said. I don't know if he wrote it down anywhere, but apparently he said the greatest enemy of the spiritual life is a bad memory. Which
Yeah,
sounds crazy, like, oh, it's not the devil, it's not pride, it's not, no, it's a bad memory.
yeah,
But the reason he was saying it is that when we have experiences, and I think he's mostly thinking of positive experiences in his case, like remarkable positive spiritual experiences, we tend to forget them, and after the fact to kind of poo-poo them and say, I'm not sure that was real, when in the
sort of
moment we were
minimally.
very
Yeah,
certain. And one of his concerns for the people he was sort of teaching to be closer to Jesus was you have to be very conscious about retaining the things that you've experienced, particularly with respect to the supernatural. And
Mm,
I think this probably applies in this case as well with things like the reality of demons. Like, have you had an experience in your life where you did feel confident about this, and is it just you're now kind of more disconnected, down to earth
you're
self,
sort of separated
telling
from,
yourself,
yeah,
not sure that was real.
yeah. This
Just
is
food for thought.
reminding me of outside of the supernatural realm. This is a studied brain phenomenon where you will minimize past events.
Hmm.
So like there are a lot of studies around pregnancy, and I think they've done it with various other traumas as well. But like a lot of the ones I've read around pregnancy, where basically um, women will forget, for lack of a better word,
How
like
bad it
how
was in one
no
another.
how bad the birth was. And there are various theories about where like if women really remembered how bad it was, they wouldn't continue to have children, and then the human race would collapse. Um, 'cause-
Wow. I can
so
see
it's like
yeah,
a
the
defensive
evolutionary.
mechanism.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
see the evolutionary anthropologists going nuts with that. Like,
yeah.
humans evolved. Maybe men forced women into only women who would forget how bad childbirth was were the women who
That's
got to have kids.
over time we've just evolved to be a forgetful species. Um,
Well, it's definitely, if we're going to go down the psychology route, it's definitely protective. Like,
yes,
there are
yeah,
so many things every human is going to experience, which you have to be able to put behind
yeah.
you. I mean, I'm personally a big believer in just stuffing everything down deep where you don't have to ever
That's right.
reflect or process it.
Never look at it again. It's safe.
Exactly.
It's a safe coping mechanism.
If my friend Chris C listens to this episode, I hope she's proud of me. Uh, Deep cut there. Um,
Anyway,
so I asked the
back to
question about,
devils. What do
yeah,
you think about devils?
thank you for asking me. I asked you, so now you can ask me. I have the ball. Uh, so I had this great conversation, and it was a difficult conversation, but great conversation with this guy I used to be in a music group with. And we were traveling, so we were in a hotel, didn't have anything else to do. And he was very smart guy, but kind of an avowed, definite atheist slash agnostic. Probably agnostic is the right answer. And he pushed me. This is what you get when you have a real serious conversation or debate with somebody who profoundly disagrees with you about something, is they teach you new things. Like,
Mhm.
it forces you to examine things you'd never been forced to examine before. So he was really pushing me over the course of this 3 or 4 hour conversation on why it's reasonable to believe in the existence of God or something like God,
Mhm.
which I think is a really worthwhile thing to discuss. And at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, I think he got me to the point where I was saying, I don't think human beings are sufficient to explain the existence of the universe or even to explain the existence of human beings.
Mhm.
I could not, nor could all human beings ever create a human being. We certainly didn't create ourselves. We came from something less than human beings, or we were put here by aliens or something. But
Yeah.
eventually you have to get back to something greater, something broader, something with a wider context and kind of a deeper connection to reality than human beings ourselves have. And to me, that's enough to say, okay, stop. You've now, if you agree with that, you're at a point where you can say the existence of something that I would have to take on faith is possible. If I'm not sufficient to explain everything that is in existence, there must be something that is sufficient, something that is greater than me, whether it's alive, whether it's a person, whatever, whether it's a force, whether it's still around. There must be something else. And if it's capable of understanding and defining reality in a deeper way than me, I need to acknowledge that there's a possibility there are things about myself and things about reality that I am incapable of understanding. I can never understand.
Hmm.
And if that possibility is true, that opens the possibility that there might be things that could be shown to me, which I must accept on faith, which cannot be accepted solely because I can understand them. I would love if I could understand everything. Um, but if I am not the greatest thing, the greatest reality that exists, the possibility that something could be shown to me that I might need to just accept on the basis of seeing it, um, rather than fully understanding it, that opens the possibility of faith. Um, so to me, it's at least logically reasonable that there are things that I can't understand, and just in general, anything that fits in the supernatural would fall in that category. I won't
Yeah.
ever fundamentally understand reality like a demon if it exists, an angel if it exists, God if it exists, if God's a person, if God's a he, if God's a Trinity. None of these things are things that I should expect to be able to understand. But reason can take me, I think, to the point where I can say, I can admit there are things that could be shown to me which I cannot understand. Um, and that's what I would call faith, is those things would be known by faith, in the event that they could be shown to me. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
that's very abstract. But any thoughts on that
Fine.
word vomit there?
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess that makes sense. And maybe that's why, sometimes I have more of a doubt that not necessarily that the devil exists, but that he
Mhm.
is as active as some
Yeah.
of these
Well, I
Exorcist
have
files would
that.
have you believe.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so yeah, maybe that is where a lot of the doubt comes from, is that it just seems so out there, um, that you go, well, that can't be real. Um,
Because
but
it's
to your
not like this
point,
in my life.
yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, well, I haven't experienced, the devil making my head spin around.
Right.
So, but to your point, that if you believe that there are things out there that are unexplainable, that you're not going to be able to comprehend, then I think you have to accept that. Uh, yeah, I mean, this could fall into that category of unexplainable supernatural things.
Yeah. So to get down to brass tacks, I hope I'm not mixing metaphors. I tend to do that at times. Can we go into some of the details of some of the crazy stuff that happened in this case of? I already
Yeah,
forgot the name.
Joe and Mary.
It's Joseph and Tammy, or
I don't know. I think the names are changed anyway. So his
yeah.
name is probably Greg or
Actually,
something.
the wife's name appears as both Alicia and Tammy. So I think that was a mistake on the producer's part,
Uh,
and that Tammy is actually the wife's actual name. So
or maybe it's the actress's name or something.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Well, so Joseph, the husband, basically, it, it starts out like very almost routine. Like he gets depressed and he stops working and stops talking to people.
yep.
Um,
So he's developing
and
a vitamin D deficiency because he doesn't
yeah,
go
which I mean,
outside
like
during the
lots of
day.
people get that in the winter.
Yeah.
I think all of the UK experiences that. Um, so yeah, it starts out sort of like, not much is happening, and then gradually things escalate, um, to the point where he's home by himself one day, and his wife comes back to find him about to hang himself in the garage.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, what one of the things that I find fascinating with this is, as you listen to these cases, you'll find that, like, Father Martins is really big on making sure that people have covered all the other explanations before they go straight to the devil made me do it. Um,
Yeah.
so
So Joseph he'd gone to doctors
yeah,
and psychologists, psychiatrists. They had tried him on different, like
he'd given
SSRIs and so forth.
antidepressants.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'd done all this blood work. Yeah, and basically nothing super abnormal had come back, and none of the medications really working, and his symptoms continued to get worse.
Right.
Um, and so that's the point where they're like, okay, maybe let's involve an exorcist, maybe
Yeah.
something else. Or
And
well, or actually, I think what happened before they even went to Father Martin's is his wife started praying like with Joseph in the room, and he
mhm,
got like dramatically worse.
yeah,
And I think that
and
was
some
the
weird
real,
things started to happen to him physically,
yeah,
that were just not within the realm of normal
medical issues.
biology.
Yeah,
um, yeah, and then I think the biggest thing we see happening when the priest gets involved is in the priest's presence. They're I would say the biggest manifestation of what's going on with Joseph here is uh, definitely what seem to be persons who are not Joseph speaking through him.
right,
Uh,
right. Sort of like a multiple personality disorder, except all the other personalities are they're demons.
yeah, yeah. So good. That's a pretty good setup, I think. I think the details are actually quite interesting. This is a quick listen to. The total listen time is about an hour and a half, but it went really fast for me. Like
Yeah,
you made me read this James Bond novel, which I didn't read. I listened to it on audiobook.
all right. That was
Um,
probably like 15 hours long.
it was longer, but also it didn't go as quickly as this. So I enjoyed listening to that novel, but I definitely noticed the time pass as I did
Yeah,
so. But this, it was like it happened
yeah,
fast. So yeah, go listen to that. Like I said, the dramatization is a little bit weird. It was a little bit uncomfortable for me to listen to at first, but I got used to it. I don't think it's over the top. So this is something I'll comment to also on the quality of the Exorcist Files. This is, yeah, it's taking a flashy topic and it is trying to market it to some extent, but um, they're not going over the top.
yeah,
Generally, I would say you can think the whole thing's foolish, that devils don't exist, and that this is confused people or maybe even deceitful people. But even so, it's not too soap opera y.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I would like to get into some of the weird, unique things about devils and exorcisms and the spiritual realities that they get into in this episode, which strike me as surprising. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
anything popped out to you, but the
I
importance of names. I'd like to
Yeah,
talk about the importance of names. So anybody into either. So here, I'm going to say I agree with you. I think demonic spirits exist. I'm also going to say that I think a lot of like witchcrafty stuff is just nonsense. Um,
sure.
so you get like the importance of names there as well. So I want to say I know this is trying to have my cake and eat it too to some extent, but within Christianity, for example, and this is also true within Islam, um, names are really important. So in Christianity, the name of Jesus is extremely important and understood to convey a kind of power. And the same would go with the name of Muhammad in Islam. We don't think Jesus was just a prophet. We think he is God as Christians. The Muslims see Muhammad as the great prophet. So I know there's that distinction. But this, on a personal note, I have always wondered about the importance of names. And one of the things that I've consistently wondered about is the way names change through language. So we think the way Jesus' name would actually have been said in his home country while he was alive would have been something like Yeshua. Now, Yeshua and Jesus, is that the same
Yeah.
name? My name, Jacob, comes from Hebrew or Aramaic name, which would have pronounced Hakov or something like that. Is Jacob the same name? James is also derived from Hakov. Is James the same name? Is James the same name as Jacob?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, this also comes in Exorcism, where Father Martins finds that, and the experience that they have is that the name that the demons have, I don't know if they assign it to themselves or how that works. The demon's name is profoundly important as well.
Yeah.
So thoughts on this?
Yeah. No, it I don't know. It is sort of interesting. I don't know if we should say what the demon's name is, but it's it's very lame. Um, well, no, it's not like you
Yeah,
expect it to
I
be
think we
some
can share
sort of
that.
long Latin something, or Beelzebub or something, and it's not. Um,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, there is a power associated with it, in knowing what the demon's name is. And usually, if you listen to most of these cases, one of the reasons Father Martins tries to figure out the name is the name usually has a lot to do with um like how the demon acts and
Yeah.
presents itself, and
And possibly
usually,
got involved in the
yeah,
person
yeah,
who's
like,
being
the
oppressed,
demon
or
will be named, poker or something.
for
And
someone with a
they go,
gambling, yeah,
it was
gambling
the
oppression or
online
something.
gambling is that did
Yeah.
it. Which it sounds silly, but I think there it is. I mean, it's true even with regular human names, where you think, how much power is do you have in your name? It's just whatever your parents picked for you before they
Right.
even knew what your personality was. Um, but even with humans, there's
We
a
use it on
power
contracts and
there's a power to knowing what someone's name is, rather than just hey, you. Um,
yeah.
there's it opens a level of intimacy that otherwise wouldn't be there.
So one thing so here I am, a fairly big podcast consumer. One thing I actually always listen for when I'm listening to podcasts is, has the person being interviewed made a point of memorizing the first name of his interviewer or interviewers? And that to me is a mark of like personal quality. Um, Now, sometimes you're in a big hurry and don't have time to know everybody who interviewed you, but especially if in the sign off at the end of an episode, if the person being interviewed says, "Thanks, Joe," or "Great
Yeah,
talking with you, Susan," or whatever, that I always notice that and think, "Wow, that's a huge mark of respect."
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That
Veronica.
you paid attention. Thanks, Jacob. Uh, yeah, no, I think that's a good point, that you respected the other person enough to hear their name and then to use that name,
Mhm.
which sort of elevates you above the level of a stranger who bumped into you on the street.
Yeah. So, actually, what you say about names brings up another topic that I found fascinating, which is that in this world of exorcisms, knowing a name is not enough. So, it's not like this thing in pop culture where it's like, oh, you know the name of a demon or whatever else, and you can command it to do whatever you want.
Sure.
You, knowing the name is not enough. You also have to have the authority to actually compel it to do something. And I found this
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah, and
because.
so this is
Mhm.
um this so Father Martin says sort of a set way that he'll go about most of the cases, and usually
Yeah.
it's figure out what the name is, and then figure out how the demon got access into this person. Um, and then sometimes there'll be some additional steps in there, something like figure out what the demon's really scared of, like is it holy water, is it the name of Mary. um, but I think like those are kind of always his two big steps: is figure out what the name is and figure out how it got in. um, so yeah, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
So, to give a little more context to this, in the Catholic Church, first off, non Catholic Christians often do not find much success in performing exorcisms. Again, you don't have to believe that any of this is real, but. And you could just say, well, that's further evidence that the Catholic Church is definitely not real, not real Christians. But I'll just throw that out there for what it's worth. The other is that within the Catholic Church, regular priests do not have all of the abilities and the fullness of being priests. Only bishops do.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things that only priests are able to do, but they can't do unless their bishop delegates them. And I bring this up because this is specifically true of exorcisms. You cannot go to any Catholic priest and say, "Hey, I need an exorcism,"
Yeah.
and the priest cannot. I think there are actually concrete instances. Again, maybe you don't believe any of this is real. Concrete instances where Catholic priests, who are actual priests, have attempted to cast out demons without the authorization of the bishop whom they serve under, and have been
And it
told
hasn't
off by the
worked.
demons,
Yeah.
saying, "We don't have to do what you say."
We
Um,
don't have to listen to you.
yeah,
You're not the official exorcist
right.
trademark.
So the actual directions in the Catholic Church are, every diocese should have a designated exorcist. So I know who the exorcist for the diocese that I live in is. Um, and in serious cases where there's a strong demonic influence on a person, um, that person specifically, or the bishop needs to designate someone else to
Yeah.
take care of it. So I just want to throw it
Well,
out there that this authority thing is kind of wild and extremely
yeah.
like concrete.
Yeah. Well, and I do, I guess, not, this is not to push back on what you said, but that's not to say that regular priests or even regular people can't cast out demons.
Hmm. Yep, I agree.
Like I could probably cast out a demon. I'm not gonna try. I don't know any demons available for me to cast out. But basically, there are certain levels. There are levels among demons. There are weaker ones. There are stronger ones, and there are certainly ones that are powerful enough to tell people off who don't have the proper authority.
Yeah. And
I
I think
think
there are also different degrees to which a demon can have its hooks in a person, which
right,
also are going to affect that.
right. So certainly, if you think you're being possessed, don't think you can't go to a priest. Because either the priest could dispossess you or he would know who to send you to.
Yep.
um
Yeah, and
but
most average Catholics on the street aren't going to know who who the nearest or currently approved exorcist
dial an
is.
exorcist.
Yeah, dial an exorcist.
That
Although I
should
think,
There should be like a map somewhere of where all the exorcists are.
yeah. So I've spent a fair amount of time kind of deep in the Catholic world, and I do want to comment that one of my bugbears has been the lack of standardization from diocese to diocese.
Oh
So
yeah.
um,
Yes, some
the Catholic
dioceses have
Church is,
hired good
in,
IT guys to set up
yeah.
their websites, and
Well, it's
some of
not just good
them,
IT people. It's you can have different good ideas which are equally good but don't match at all.
yeah,
Um, so again, for people listening, there's can sometimes be this external view of the Catholic Church. Even people within the Catholic Church can think of it this way, that it's extremely top-down authoritarian. Structurally, it's not. Unfortunately, the humans in the Catholic Church sometimes make it more top-down authoritarian than it ought to be, in my opinion. But structurally, the Catholic Church is extremely localized, where basically
yeah,
every diocese, and dioceses, I mean, there are over 400,000 Catholic priests in the world, and the typical diocese has about 1,000 priests, like on average. So
yeah,
400-ish dioceses in the world, probably more. That number sounds too low, but many dioceses, and each bishop is basically his own little prince,
yeah.
effectively.
I mean, it's
Um,
like an extreme version of states' rights.
yeah,
Like you go between different bishops, and you can get like wildly different things that are permitted. Uh,
yep, yep.
yeah, I mean,
And
yes, generally
even
we're all
yeah,
kind of doing the same thing, but on
e-
the local level, it can be.
even the famous claim of papal infallibility, where the Pope can't do nothing wrong, um, only has to do with matters of faith and morality, and only applies when he is acting or teaching in union with all of the bishops in the world.
Yeah,
So, like, the parameters for exercising that, the last serious attempt a pope has made to claim papal infallibility was when John Paul II finished publishing the most recent version of the Catholic Catechism in 1988. And the reason he claimed it is every single bishop in the world signed off on that document.
yeah, yeah. It's a
So,
very limited scope of.
yeah,
It's not like the Pope is always right in everything he says.
right. Anyway, this is again diverged from talking about demons and exorcisms and so forth. But this is cool stuff. Um, so I want to talk about the difference between the real world and the ideal world. Maybe I don't fully know what to think about this. So
Okay.
in my day to day life, there are people who have positions of authority over me. I work for a boss. In the spiritual world, I acknowledge a hierarchy within the church world that I live in, that in certain spiritual matters, there are people who have authority over me. Um, Growing up as a kid, my parents had authority over me. None of them could simply utter a command to me and I would be obliged to follow it. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a human being with free will. Like, my boss can tell me what to do and I can just decide to do something different. And then maybe
You get
our
fired.
relationship as boss and employee will fracture. Um, and maybe that's getting toward what I'm wondering about is it seems like in this spiritual world that Father Martins is encountering, that that structure is not breakable. Like, there
Yeah.
is an authority structure which cannot be broken. And how do you an authority structure that cannot be broken, the only way that's possible is if the people bound in it are forced, like the reality of their existence forces them to follow the correct authority structure, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Like that's like the rule followers ideal world, like in the flesh, not in the
Yeah.
flesh.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, it is fascinating because you listen to these cases and it is like at a certain point the devil has to give up his name, and the
Yeah,
devil knows when he tells Father Martin what his name is and how he got access. Like, the devil has to know that Father Martin is gonna eventually win, but they can't stop it. They can't
right.
help themselves at a certain point. They're like, I have to answer this question even though it's going to make me lose this battle for a person.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it is fascinating because on if you're talk to like a human evil person, like a murderer or something, and the police are asking them questions, they can lie all day long. There isn't any point where a murderer has to say, yes, I murdered that person. Where it seems like
Yep.
with the
Mhm.
demons, it does get to a point where they're forced against their will, uh, to answer questions.
Yeah, I agree with that. And well, what you're saying is what I was thinking as I was listening to this episode as well. And it makes me reflect on the human experience and how different that is for us.
Yeah.
Um, but it also makes me reflect on the change in human experience, where when we're young, we're sponges and we just soak up everything. We're so plastic, and you know, our ability to pick up new ideas and so forth is so huge, but nothing's set in stone. And as we age, we get more and more rigid and more unchanging and more set in our ways, and it becomes more and more difficult to change or to adjust to something new. And at the end of everyone's life, we all go the same way. Everyone dies,
Yeah.
so there's no variability or alternative options available when we depart. Um, and it just makes me wonder if we're sort of if we're being prepared, like if a normal human life is sort of setting someone up for entering into a different kind of being.
Existence.
Yeah, a different kind of
Yeah.
existence. And if that structure and trajectory is kind of written into the fabric of the material world that we all inhabit here. Again, you don't have to believe any of this is real. Um, I'm not assuming that anyone does think there is an afterlife. I mean, even most serious Jews
Yeah.
don't. I shouldn't say most. I think many, at least. Um, so
That's fascinating.
this
So you're
bears.
thinking if we get to heaven, uh, we would be similar to the demons and that we have less of a free will. I'm trying to synthesize this down into like a sentence.
Yes, that I think if there's human life after death, it's going to look more like this thing we're seeing in these exorcism
Okay,
stories, where there is this strict hierarchy which cannot be broken, and
right.
relationships within it are going to follow very concrete rules without kind of the flexibility and lack of concreteness that human relationships and
That
experiences
we would
are
experience on
always
Earth.
part of.
Huh.
Yeah. But I will throw in this caveat. I do also think distinctly that um, within Christian theology, there also is the idea that humans will be reunited with their physical bodies. I think you have to say that that is also going to have an impact. That's going to bring in a dynamic to, a
Right.
theoretical existence after death. If you're bringing in physicality to materiality to some degree into that. So I'm not saying it's going to look exactly like this, but in certain regards, I think it is going to look more like this.
Do you think uh, part of the reason that the demons have such a rigid rule following structure, or whatever you want to call it, um, is because they're only spirit?
Yes.
They're not sort of I don't know, confused by having a spirit plus a body.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. There's this YouTube Shorts channel I've been following that's Crispy Pizza up in New York City. And
Okay.
one of the
Hundred
guys is
percent.
always like 100%. uh, anyhow, yes, and I think the same would apply to angels as well.
Okay.
I think maybe part of the reason it's so weird for demons to get involved in exorcisms and so forth is to have to they get forced into like this being forced to experience the way humans actually
Yeah.
interact with reality and with spiritual things. And maybe part of the reason they're caught by surprise is it's a reality that is so foreign to the kind of existence that they have. Um, and
Interesting.
Father
Yeah.
Martins catches them making weird mistakes. Um,
Yeah. Which wouldn't make sense for like a rational human to make,
right.
but maybe it does make sense for the demon to make them because the demon's not used to having a body.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say probably
yeah.
can't even conceptualize in the same way I can't conceptualize being a purely spiritual reality.
Yeah.
Um, so, all right. Well, there's some.
Some food for thought on your Friday night.
Yeah, exactly. What else do we have here? I don't know that I have too much more I want to talk about. The role of Mary, Jesus's mother, comes up to some extent in this episode, and I think is worth conversation. But I think we'll have a later
Yeah.
conversation that's probably more worthwhile bringing this up. Is there anything more we want to say about Joseph and his wife, or about this particular episode, Veronica?
I don't know. I think it's fascinating how long some of these cases take.
Hmm.
Uh, and like as you listen to the other cases, you'll get an idea. But I mean, maybe just because of the sort of sensationalism through various Hollywood movies. Sometimes you
Yeah.
get the idea that like the Exorcist shows up, he lights some candles, and boom, in
Right.
one night everything's done. And you really get this sense through listening to Father Martin's and the various cases that like no, this could be like a months long where like I mean sort of like a human psychologist where you're meeting with this person for a long time and uh, lots of different prayers and angles of attack
Right.
before you finally get to the point where like yes double is gone.
Yeah. And I can corroborate that, not so much from personal experience as
Say wait Jake, this is the
I have had
first we
close
learn you have no
contact.
feelings and you've been
Yeah.
possessed by a devil.
Hmm. Um, I've had many close conversations with a lot of people who've been much more involved in this stuff than I have, more on the level of Father Martins, and yeah, I would say that's a general note. Is that these things are almost never quick
Like a one
fixes.
and done. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say that's kind of fitting with the way humans are, that when people get themselves into big problems, that's almost never a quick
Yeah.
thing either.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
it's this trail, this descending trail to a really bad place, and then you got to climb back out of that. But
Yeah.
all right,
That's really positive.
there we go. Got to keep everybody on their toes and not overly positive. Um,
Right.
you never want to be upset by reality, by it being.
Hey, if people were really happy, they would not listen to our podcast again. It's only because they're sort of sad and desperate that they found us in the first place.
Yes. Have I told you that a certain amount of my podcast consumption is simply to control my mood?
I
So
mean, I feel like that's true for a lot of people.
probably so. All right. So are you ready for
Wiki
the
roulette.
final part of the episode, Wiki Roulette? I haven't looked into. I do need to look into like some custom parameters to make sure this actually returns us articles with like more than 3 sentences, because
Yeah,
that's been a problem at times. But let's give it a go. Are you ready, Veronica?
go for it.
Little Bone 74B. So great example. This is one, two,
Yeah,
3 sentences long.
yeah. We need
Um,
some sort of like there need to be 1,000 words or something.
right. This is in Saskatchewan, which I actually do know some stuff about. But shall we try again?
All I know is about the pirates, but yeah, we should try again. Uh,
Okay.
there you go.
This article
Case in
is
point, even
two
shorter.
sentences. Naoto Okazaki. Let's try again and see what we get. Oh, look at that. I don't know that this is significantly better.
It's
This
not
is
that much
this is Megan Schnurr, a retired American soccer midfielder who played for Sky Blue FC of women's professional soccer.
I think we
I
should
feel
have
like we can talk about some stuff with this
we should
article,
have
Veron.
stayed with Saskatchewan.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, go
Connecticut
for it.
Huskies, they do traditionally have, from what I have seen, a lot of good female sports players come through there. I believe their women's basketball team is historically quite excellent.
Yeah, for being such a small state, they have a surprising level of athletic competence.
Well, and particular schools will pull people from across the country. So
Sure.
I used to be more involved in the serious swimming world, and there are about 5 colleges in the United States, and they're not colleges universities. They're not
Yeah,
universities you would expect, which are all of the best swimmers in the U.S. and in the world go to those 5.
yeah,
Um, so I think it's the same for a lot of college sports.
yeah,
But this is
yeah. That's
interesting
what
to
it is.
me because I had seen the Connecticut Huskies in women's basketball. I wasn't aware it was also women's soccer. So just data point.
Uh, well, presumably Huskies would be all of their teams now.
Yes, but what I'm saying
Uh,
is the Connecticut Huskies, the Connecticut Huskies women basketball team is extremely good. This article is an
yeah,
indication that their soccer team is also extremely good, which is a little
got it.
surprising to me. So, Connecticuters, fill us in on this.
I think their track and field's also very good.
Okay, are you
Oh,
clicking through? I'm
no, no, no.
restricting
That's
myself to this
off the
page.
top of my head.
So let's
I
read a
know
little
track
of
and field
this.
athletes who went there.
Veronica, do you want to share some of the highlight details of Megan Elizabeth Schnurr's life and professional career?
I mean, it's not that long. Apologies to
She's
Megan,
not
but
particularly old. She's
this
turning 40 this year.
this is true. Uh, yeah, played college soccer. Uh, let's see, 2-time Big East midfielder of the year.
Hmm.
Sounds good. She played women's professional soccer for Sky Blue FC. You already said that. Magic Jack. Magic Jack is amazing.
What? This is not in the article. So she then took an arrow to the knee.
No, she
And
played for Magic Jack. It's in her senior career
what?
in 2011.
Okay. She took an arrow to the knee in 2011. Yeah, she had knee surgery, but I had to get it the
Like
Skyrim
that's a
referencing.
very common
Yeah, for soccer
sports
players.
injury of any.
Yeah, and female professional soccer players, well, and college level soccer players, also have a higher prevalence of ligament and tendon injuries in general than male
Females of,
athletes do.
I think all female athletes have higher knee injuries because the angle from our hips to our ankles is
Hmm.
wider than men.
Okay.
It puts additional strain, particularly on the knee,
Gotcha.
because
Okay.
broadly speaking, women have broader hips than men.
Yeah. I think probably also something that plays into it is the significant differentiator in muscle, as well as other things like bone density, but in muscle development between men and women is testosterone levels. Women have testosterone, men just have a lot more.
Right.
Testosterone primarily makes upper body musculature significantly different. Lower body musculature, adjusted for size, not that much of a difference from higher testosterone levels. So, effectively, what I'm saying is a woman's lower body, a woman's legs will have much greater musculature compared to her total body size and her bone size than in her upper body. So,
Correct. And
just
men would
from
be the
that,
reverse.
yeah, just from that, I would expect women would have more hip and ankle and knee problems
Wait,
typically.
I don't. I would say it would be the reverse if we're saying just from that. If you have more muscles on your in one area of your body, surely it would be more protected
It's
from
going to be more
various
protected in
injuries.
some ways, but less in others. So, an ACL tear is a ligament injury, which your muscles can do very little to protect you from.
Oh, this is true.
So,
Okay, so
and
you're
in
saying
fact, your
because the
muscles will put you in a
muscles,
situation where you can exert more leverage against the ligament.
okay, because the
So, having
muscles are
more,
outsized for the rest
yeah,
of the structure.
that's my theory crafting.
Okay.
So,
See.
just we solved the problem of injuries in women's sports right here.
So
Uh,
from this theory, we should presume that men would have significantly more like shoulder elbow injuries.
Yep. And
Okay.
well, I've had both severe knee and shoulder injuries, so I don't know what that means.
I was trying to go through my back catalog of injuries, and they've all been arm related. So,
Oh yes, I remember some significant
but
examples.
but significant examples. I think that's a separate issue that might be individual to me. So I think
Hmm.
the sample size of one Veronica is not gonna bear
Hey,
out any of this.
I pull out my personal anecdotes all the time. So just before we close on this, soccer, yes or no?
I don't think I've ever watched more than 5 minutes of soccer in my life, either live
Okay.
or
I actually do watch a fair amount of Premier League and Bundesliga highlights,
yeah.
and I have played a lot of soccer. So I'm going to say I'm a soccer yes.
I actually
Fake American.
I retract my former statement. Uh, I did briefly play soccer in college until someone kicked a ball in my face and I got a black eye.
Hmm. Good
So
times though.
I did actually watch more than 5 minutes while I was
Yeah.
myself playing.
So my understanding of the American term soccer is that we actually got it from Eton, as in the British
Really?
public school, meaning private, super elite private
Yeah.
school. And
Where
then it
they
had something to
wear
do
long
with
tails.
they needed like a more special elite term to call the sport of football to differentiate themselves from everybody else. And of course, we took that term. Um,
So
but
this
yeah,
is something that I like. I think there are a lot of when you go between American English and English,
hmm,
there are a lot of words that are obviously different. Um, like no, I'm blanking all on all of them. Biscuits, crackers, cakes, cookies, that sort of thing. We have different terms, and I think broadly a lot of the
okay.
American
So it's not
terms.
Eton, but it's Oxford. So I mean, hey, same difference.
Eton, Oxford, same thing. Uh, if we have any British listeners, they've now turned off. Um, but
Man,
no, I was gonna say, like broadly speaking, I think a lot of times the American term is like quote unquote more correct
yeah,
because we have the term that was used 300 years ago when there was like a more proper form of English, and we've kept
yep,
it versus the English in the UK that has evolved since then, and they've left they're not using the word from the 1700s anymore like we are.
Right. And you can see the same thing with Quebecois French. Um, to French people today sounds very antiquated and old fashioned. And this is a
Yeah.
general trend. You'll see in colonies and places further removed from the center of civilizations that the progress of change and development in things, language included, is just much slower.
Yeah.
Um,
Where they've like preserved certain things that
yep.
in sort of the natural language would have been changed.
Okay, we've gone a little bit far afield from Ms. Schnur,
Hey,
but
we got all the way from random soccer player in Connecticut to language.
there we go. I
I feel
think that
like
was
that's good.
successful. All right, shall we call it a show?
Yes, yes. Until next time.
Until episode 8, goodbye.
Farewell.